You may have heard of this show from the 60s and 70s called The Dating Game. Well, there was a contestant on that show who ends up murdering a bunch of people. Now, the contestant's name is Rodney, and Rodney's 25, he's an army vet, living in Los Angeles, and bro is an absolute psychopath, just for no reason. Like one day in 1968, he sees this 8-year-old girl walking alone, and he pulls up and he's like, "Hey, wanna ride to school?" And she gets in his car, and instead of taking her to school, he takes her to his apartment. And there, he does horrible things to her that I won't get into. But after this, police are looking for Rodney, and the FBI ends up putting him on the most wanted list. And so Rodney has to go on the run, and he goes from Los Angeles all the way to New York. And there, he changes his identity, and he changes his name, and he ends up going to film school at NYU. But Rodney isn't about to change his ways. He's still a psychopath. Because a few years later, he meets a nice woman, and she's moving into a new apartment. And Rodney offers to help her move some furniture. And once he's inside her apartment, suddenly, bam, he attacks her. And he strangles her with a pair of nylon stockings until she's unalived. Then he leaves New York City and he travels up to New Hampshire. And there, he somehow gets a job as a counselor at a kid's summer camp. And he lays low there for a few months, but then a couple of his students are at the post office one day, and there just happens to be an FBI's Most Wanted poster there, and it happens to have Rodney's face on it. So the students are like, "Yo, is that our counselor?" And they freak out and they report him. And then, boom, Rodney gets arrested, and he takes a plea deal, and they throw his ass in prison. Less than 2 years later, he gets out. He's a free man. But only 2 months after he's out, he approaches a 13-year-old girl while he's in his car, and he offers her a ride to school. And he ends up doing terrible things to her, and he gets caught, and he gets thrown back in prison again. And then 2 years after that, he gets out again. And he travels from California back to New York City. And there he meets another nice woman, and he offers to take modeling photos of her. Like, "Hey, you look like a model, I want to take your picture." And she agrees, and once they get alone, he ends up attacking her and unaliving her. And after that, I guess he travels to Wyoming. And there he meets another nice young woman. And he's like, "Let me take modeling pictures of you." And she agrees. And once they get alone, he attacks her and he unalives her too. And after that, he ends up back in Los Angeles. And while he's there, he really uses that whole, "Oh, you look like a model, let me take your picture" bit to lure women in. And he offers to photograph this 19-year-old woman, and then he unalives her and he dumps her on the side of the road. And he does the same thing to a 27-year-old woman that he meets